explain key concepts. Thanks for that. These workshops support meaningful public participation by helping community members understand technical jargon and city processes. And the idea is that then with that knowledge and understanding of those technical concepts, they can organize and advocate for equitable development in their neighborhoods. So far, we've developed 3 toolkits. We have one that explains zoning, one that explains affordable housing, and another one that explains ULURP, or the Uniform Land Use Review Process. So today's workshop is a digital component of the toolkit called What is Zoning? And we usually do these in person, and we're still figuring out the kinks of remote facilitation. So please bear with us, and we've done our best to prepare so that it's not too clunky. But let's start with a round of introductions, and please just share your name and your pronouns and what brought you here today. I'll pick on somebody. Who can I? Robert, can you start us off, please?
Yes, my name is Robert Camacho. I'm the chair of CB4. I want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence in regards to zoning. I know that zoning isn't everything, but it's a little tool that we may have on our toolcase to make sure that we can create a more deeply affordable housing and also keep what we have intact.
Thank you. Can you popcorn somebody when you're done?
Yeah. Who's next?
I got some more misspellings.
Good evening. My name is Annette Spellin. I am the chair of the Civic, Religious, and Public Safety Committee for Community Board 4. I'm also a homeowner in Community Board in Bushwick. I'll pass it on to Celeste.
All right. I was going to say, pick who goes next. Hey, everyone. Celeste, District Manager, CB4, she, her, hers pronouns. And I will pass it on to Cassandra.
Hi, I'm Cassandra, she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a new community board member and I have no idea what the heck zoning is. That's why I'm here. And I will pass to Ben.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben. I use he, him pronouns. I am very new to the community board. I'm here because I would like to learn more about zoning. It's obviously very relevant to housing, which is one of the biggest issues in our community and in the city overall. So I think it helps for everybody to get a better understanding of it, especially if we need to weigh in on matters pertaining to that. So that's why I'm here, to learn more. And I'm going to pass it to Nico.
Hi, my name is Nico. I, similar to Cassandra and Ben, are new members of Community Board 4. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm here because I'm also eager to learn more about zoning. I know it's been a topic that's been heavily covered in the news and are particularly relevant to members of our own community in particular. And I'm eager to sort of educate myself to better learn how to advocate and support the needs of those who reside in Bushwick.
Pick someone to go next.
You got to pass the torch, Nate.
Sorry, that's on me. Deborah.
I'm Deborah Hicks, and I'm just an observer. Acronyms, sometimes stun me, so I want to know more about what you do, what this is, and how it can help my community. Annette?
You were passing to me. I think it should go to Desmond now. Desdemoni. I'm sorry, Desdemoni.
Desmond Monroe, Chair of Economic Development, CB4, and also on Housing and Land Use. Pronouns are he, him.
Great. I think that's everybody. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. For those of you who mentioned that you're very new to zoning, that is perfect. This whole activity is designed for folks who are learning about it for the first time. And if I'm honest, I was worried that everybody here was going to be an expert. So I'm really glad to hear that you're starting off. Hopefully you can get a lot out of it. Would it be okay if we took photos from time to time throughout our meeting? Feel free to private message me if you would prefer not, and we won't do that. But otherwise, we'll just take some for our internal records. So yeah, let's get into it. Today, we're going to be talking about zoning. And specifically, we're going to be talking about zoning rules that affect the size and shape of a building. Zoning rules can affect the use of a building, so what's allowed to happen inside of it. That can be like a residential building or a manufacturing building or an industrial build, like a commercial building. And it can also affect the rules about how big it's allowed to be. And that's what we're going to focus on today, the size and shape. We're going to start off by learning a concept called floor area ratio. And it sounds like math, and it is, but it's actually going to be really easy, you'll see. And we're going to start off by learning about zoning, starting with just one building. And then we're going to see how it affects an entire neighborhood. And then we're going to close by talking about what a rezoning is and what are some things we might be concerned about if we hear that there's a rezoning in our neighborhood. So yeah, that's what we got going on today.
I'm happy to kick us off with our first activity. So as Agustin said, we're going to be talking about how zoning works in the city. And we'll get into what it's used for, what rules are a part of it, and rezoning. But first, we would just want to start off with like setting the stage of what is zoning. Have you heard about zoning? What have you heard about it? Feel free to either come off mute and say your answer, or you can put it in the chat and we'll say it out loud.
Well, I've heard about zoning, and to the contrary, it has not been good. Never thought about it until they wanted to put a 20-story monstrosity on my corner in the middle of a residential area. So I've learned that zoning is also political. It's not necessarily about environment. A lot of players are in there, yet it excludes the voice of the community. So that's what I learned about zoning.
I will say my experience is kind of similar to what Deborah said. I had always thought of zoning as something that was very technical and only involved in like real estate and certain industries. But recently I've kind of come to viewing it in pretty negative light, or just like it's been presented in very negative way with regards to, you know, a shortage of housing availability, with too many buildings being classified or zoned for commercial, with it being maybe too complicated to rezone or to reclassify buildings that were built to be commercial, and with possibly that presenting a solution. But again, I don't really know that much about all these things.
I agree with the both of them. And one of the things that I found is that zoning takes away from the ambiance of the neighborhood. You have a neighborhood like Bushwick. We have 3 family homes here, and all of a sudden now you have these additions being put on top of these houses, taking away from an entire block and the neighborhood. So I think it's political, and I think it's about making money for these real estate agents and these construction workers.
Great. Thank you all for, everyone who has shared. We're going to get into throughout the workshop, exploring some of the pros and cons of zoning. And first want to start off with just like why zoning law exists. So zoning law exists to keep similar things together and keep things that don't go well together apart. So zoning law helps protect health and safety, but it also creates predictable environments that help protect individual property values. And so it's like you can't build a tower, but neither can your neighbor. So zoning law uses two major tools to shape neighborhoods: rules about use, which means like what types of activities can happen in the place, like housing or industry, and where, and rules about size and shape, which is sometimes called bulk. So today we're going to be focused more on how size and shape zoning works.
Great. So we're going to start off with this concept called floor area ratio. And this is an important acronym to remember. We just say FAR, even though it spells FAR, you're just supposed to say FAR. And we have a few activities in which you'll be building some buildings on your own that help you understand the concept of FAR. So it stands for floor area ratio. How do y'all think FAR might control the size and shape of a building? What do y'all think it has to do with?
How much square footage?
That's definitely part of it. Yeah.
How much square
More
footage?
land, the higher you can build, the taller you can build.
The land it's on definitely has something to do with it.
Does it have to do with being able to build it only as high as it is wide because of the usability of the space on the inside? So like if you had a low floor area ratio, you wouldn't be able to build beyond a certain height, let's say, but if you have a higher floor area ratio, you could argue that more space could be used on the inside for, I don't know, for like a commercial space or for more apartments, for instance, in an apartment building.
Yep, that definitely is a part of FAR for sure. So FAR is a way of thinking of building size in terms of how much floor space it has, also called square footage, so what Robert said, and the size of the piece of land that it's built on, which is also called a lot. So it's a ratio of the square footage to the size of the lot. And as Ben was saying, it definitely has to do with height restrictions as well. That's a rule we'll get to a little bit later. But for now, I'm going to share my screen just so y'all can see this ratio, because it is an actual ratio. Let me see here. We're going to share this link in just a second. But for now, I wanted to show you this. Can everybody see this? So FAR is the total floor area, so the total square feet of all the floors in a building, divided by the lot area, which is the total square feet of the building that you're building on. So as some of y'all were getting at, a tower would have a really high FAR. Oops. Because a tower has loads of floor space and a really small lot size. But a one-story detached house with a yard would have a really low FAR because it has a small amount of floor space compared to a relatively bigger lot size. So what do y'all think is a neighborhood in Brooklyn that would have a really high FAR on average?
Brooklyn Heights,
Downtown Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, Cadman Plaza.
That's right. Anywhere where you see the towers, you know they have a high FAR, because otherwise they wouldn't have been allowed to build that high or that much square footage on such a small lot. So I'm going to hand it over to Janae to introduce this tool, and we're going to share this link for y'all to get into this as well.
Yeah, so basically what's going to happen is Augustine will be modeling this activity, but we also would like you to do it on your own computers as well. So we're going to share a link in the chat. And it might be difficult to both like look at the Zoom screen and do this activity at the same time. So you can focus on just like listening to us while you do the activity, and coming back or speaking to let us know if you have a question. And if you have trouble like viewing the tool or using the tool on your own, like you can't be on a website right now for some reason, like maybe you're on your phone, you can just follow along on the screen share because you'll also be able to see what folks are doing there. But it's funner if you do it on your own. So you want to go to whatisfar.org. Did you put the link in the chat, Augustine?
I did. Can y'all,
Great.
for some
And
reason, it's not hyperlinking, but if you copy and paste it into your URL, it'll work.
And when you get there, you want to click on Basics of FAR. Could folks just give me like a thumbs up when they get there so I know where folks are at? Okay. A couple folks need a minute. But basically, after you click Basics of FAR, you click OK, and you want to read the instructions and keep going until you get to what's your lot area. And you can also give me a thumbs up once you've read through the instructions so I know where folks are at.
Annette, what's going on?
I'm not getting the screen.
Okay, let me
I
try
went
that.
to chat. It came up one time and then it went away. Okay, should I go to what is FAR?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay. I'm there.
Once you're there, you want to click on Basics of FAR and then click OK.
I'm back at this is section. And
That's great.
Yeah, and you want to read through these instructions and click OK.
okay. Okay. Now I get how to use bricks.
Yep.
That's
I want
perfect.
you to read through the instructions and you can keep going until you finish and you get to what's your lot area.
Oh, okay.
We'll just give it a couple more seconds to make sure everyone catches up. Do you want to keep going through, Augustine?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so after you've read through the instructions, you should be at a screen that looks like this. You'll see the activity name on the top left, and under there will be extra information about the kind of building you'll be building, and sometimes hints or tips as well. And on the right side, you'll see some dashed lines for the lot footprint, and that's where you'll be able to build. Does anyone have questions about like what you're looking at or like need to get here and hasn't gotten here yet? All right, sounds like folks are good. So we can start.
Okay. Great. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out our lot area. So our lot are those dotted lines that you see here to the right of the screen. I'm tracing the perimeter with my mouse if you happen to be looking. So your lot is 20 feet wide, and it's 100 feet deep. And that's a pretty common lot size for a row house or a brownstone neighborhood in New York City. And there's a space over here to the left for you to enter in your lot area. And it'll tell you got it right if you got it right. So can anybody just shout out what the lot area is? It's 20 feet wide by 100 feet deep. So
2000.
2000, I heard it, yeah. Okay, so if you type in 2000 like I did here and press OK, it'll let you know that you got it right. And then you can just press OK. So now what we're going to do is start building a building to explore this concept of FAR. So cover your lot with one layer of bricks and don't put any on top of each other yet. We're just going to make a one-story building that covers the entire lot. And you can place a brick by just clicking on the dotted lot area like I'm about to do. Okay. How are folks doing? Have they been able to build a one-story building?
That's big, man.
That's big. It's pretty big. It certainly couldn't be any bigger if it were just one story.
But they ain't got no yard. Is it supposed to be 60 feet only instead of the 100?
Okay, someone's been reading ahead.
No one been reading ahead.
We're going to get to that in a minute. For now, we're just going to get familiar with floor area ratio. Okay, so would anybody like one more minute or something? You can just let me know. Say it out loud because I can't see you right now. Okay. So what is the floor area of the building? Somebody please just shout it out.
2000.
That's right. And so if the floor area of the building is 2000 and the lot area is also 2000, what is the FAR?
One.
That's right. And thanks for this. It starts out very basic, you guys. It'll get more interesting in a second, but we're just starting with the basics. So the way we usually say FAR or express FAR numbers is by saying 1.0. So this building would have an FAR of 1.0. Great. So that was just the very beginning. I'm going to pass it over to Janae for the next step.
So now you should be at 4. Let's add some floors. So you can keep the same total number of blocks, which is 10, but we'd like you to rearrange them to make a taller building. And so if you need to remove blocks, you hold down Shift as you click. And so now we just want you to arrange those 10 blocks to make a taller building. Anyway, you can, yeah, it doesn't matter. Just use your 10 blocks and make sure you go up more than 1 foot. Once folks have used their 10 blocks, we'd love to see some of the buildings that you all have made. So we want to give folks an opportunity to screen share first. So does anyone want to volunteer to show us their building? Don't be shy.
I'll share. Kick
Thank
us off.
you.
All right.
So let's don't be doing one on Bushwick Avenue, okay?
This is a theoretical activity.
No way.
Cool. So one of these floors has a little balcony, and only one floor. Thank you. Can someone else share a building that they created?
I can share.
Thank you. Cool. So this like penthouse has like a front balcony and a back balcony.
Damn, he trying to get everybody in that joint.
I think Augustine, maybe could you show us the building that you made?
Yeah, I'll share it.
So for all three of these buildings, since we use the same number of blocks and are using the same lot area, yeah, what is the FAR of all of these three buildings? 1. So yeah, it's still 1. So this is just to show you that an FAR of 1.0 could look many different ways. So buildings of different shapes can have the same FAR, and it's not about shape or height, it's about the floor area versus the lot area. Before we go on to the next activity, we just want to take a quick note about different FARs for different places. So the city sets different FARs for different zones from 0.5 to 15.0. What kind of building do you think might have a FAR of 0.5? This is when the whole building is half the size of the lot.
Would that be like a single family home, smaller single family home?
Exactly. It's like a 1-story house with a yard. And what kind of building do you think might have an FAR of 15.0? This is where one whole building would be 15 times the size of the lot.
Something with a commercial space in the bottom?
Someone with what?
A
Commercial space?
in the
Yeah.
bottom?
Yeah, totally. Like when I think of this number, I think of like an office tower in Manhattan, and those usually have like a commercial space on the bottom and then offices on top. Great. So I'll kick it off to Augustine to do the next activity. So you can click I'm done.
Cool. Okay, so now let's say that the city increases your FAR from 1.0 to 2.0. So now you have enough bricks to build a 2.0 building, and everyone build an FAR 2.0 building that covers the whole lot. So it means that you can make a building twice as big as before. And just so you know, as you're building, there's a little FAR calculator on your screen in the bottom left that's gonna let you know what your FAR is as you build. So keep building until it says 2.0. And I'm gonna do the same. Okay, and when you're done, you can click the black box that says I'm done. And you should see a little pop-up window that asks whether you want to keep building with more FAR or go on to the next step. And you can say next step. So I'm going to do that now. Right here, click next step. Okay. Does anyone need another minute, or are we all here on step 6, take it to the edge? Just say so if you need another minute to get here. Okay, I'm gonna move on, but if anyone needs me to stop, you just shout out. Okay, so imagine a neighborhood made up of buildings like this one, or whichever one you built. They could still all look different. In your mind's eye, compare it to a neighborhood made up of buildings like the one you built in the previous step when the FAR was 1.0. Which neighborhood would y'all prefer to live in? The 1.0 neighborhood or the 2.0 neighborhood?
1.0.
1.0.
Okay, we got some 1.0s. Why the 1.0? What do you like about it?
Not that many people can live in there.
It's a friendlier neighborhood.
A sense
It's
of
small, it's not as wide and longer. We don't got a lot of people on top of us bothering us.
That's right.
Those are some great answers. What would be some reasons that folks might want to live in a 2.0 neighborhood, or that someone might prefer a 2.0 neighborhood?
Might be more affordable.
And why is that? Why is it more affordable?
For instance, if there's just more units of housing available, or if a building like that, it might have more tenants, or maybe more 3-bedroom apartments, like a room share situation.
2.0s would also probably carry some sort of neighborhood services, such as commercial spaces, restaurants, medical centers, and other things like that. So that's probably what I prefer that area as well. Gyms, grocery stores.
Yeah, those are some good answers too. So notice that the building that you built and that I built here goes to the very edge of the lot on both sides and on the front and on the back. And imagine that this building were slotted into a neighborhood where all of the buildings were built this way and all of the lots were right next to each other. It means that there'd just be a row of identical buildings like this in front and behind. Where would you be able to have windows if we had a neighborhood like that?
In the back and in the front.
That's right. And maybe even only in the front, because if you imagine that behind, you've got another street where the backs are facing each other, and the building went all the way to the back of the lot, maybe not even there. So to prevent that, the city usually limits how much of your lot you can build on so that you can have windows at least on the front and the back. In a dense city like New York, it's a special thing to have windows on the side, and it can happen if your building is taller than the one next to it, or if you're on a corner lot. But windows isn't the only reason we don't build to the edges of our lot. If we all built to the edges of our lot, what do you think might happen if there was a fire in one of the buildings?
You couldn't get into it. Fire department couldn't get in.
And the
Yeah.
people couldn't get out.
That could be. It could also jump from building to building, because if there's no separation between the lots and the buildings are right up against each other on the sides and in the front and back, the fire could spread more easily. So to address these light and safety concerns, the city has other rules in addition to FAR that control the size and shape of our buildings. And one of those rules is called maximum lot coverage. And this is something that was mentioned earlier. Maximum lot coverage is the maximum percentage of the lot that you can build on. So in this case, we're only allowed to build on 60% of the lot. So for this activity, take your FAR 2.0 building and rearrange the blocks so that they only cover 60% of your lot. And it can be any shape you like, as long as it covers 60% of the lot and not more than that. So I'm going to take a minute to do that. Would anybody like to show us their building? I'm going off the script a little bit, but I'm just curious to see what y'all's buildings look like at this point. Feel free to just share.
Yeah, I'll show mine. Oh, let's do this.
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to hit that share screen button and show us what you got?
I'll share.
Thank you. Yep, that's another way to do it. Thank you. Okay, I'll take us back. Great. So maximum lot coverage ensures that buildings aren't too crowded together. And originally this rule came to make sure that tenement buildings got enough light and air and were safe for residents to live in and to be able to get out of during fires. And yeah, if everyone built to the lot line on every side, there would be very few windows and only one exit for emergencies. Next, we're going to be talking about a similar rule called minimum yard requirements.
Yeah, so you can click I'm done and it'll take you to the next window. And so you should see number 7 and give it breathing room on the left. So minimum yard requirements say where on your lot you can build by telling you the minimum amount of yard space you're required to have. These yards are also called setbacks, say how far back from the lot line your building has to be. They're called yards, but in New York City, sometimes they don't really look like yards. So now you can rearrange your building using the same number of blocks. So it has a front yard at least 10 feet deep and a backyard at least 30 foot deep. And so once you have a new building, we'd like you to reflect on if you'd rather live here or in the neighborhood where all the buildings were built to the lot line.
I definitely think, oh, sorry, was it? You're
No,
supposed
yeah.
to reflect silently.
Oh, no. Yes, we do want you to share.
Okay. I definitely would want to not live somewhere where like buildings were like at the lot line, like just because like in addition to the safety concerns, like it looks like there's like a little more like space, like maybe like in this building there would be like a front yard or like a large backyard where maybe you could like put a playground or like have like a yard where you could like grow plants or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can use other parts of your lot for other uses. Yeah, what about other folks?
I think I agree with Cassandra. I'd rather live in a space that wasn't built up to the edge because there's a possibility of being able to utilize the front or the back space if you have access to it. And then I think in addition to that, just not having being like pressed right up against the road or right up against the sidewalk, just having a little bit of breathing space for your front door. It would also enable possibly your building to be more accessible. You can build a wheelchair accessible ramp. You can build a staircase landing as well, and it gives you more space to be able to do both of those things.
Question, please.
Yes.
Can you acquire, okay, let me be specific. We have a corner lot that has 30, maybe 30 by 50 feet. Then we have an adjacent strip of land. Can you use that adjacent strip of land to add on to the acreage so that you can have a different kind of farm and build taller and higher and higher? Can you use adjacent land that becomes your property to do the calculation?
So I think something like this would require like a formal like change. If you're talking about like combining lots into one.
Yeah.
And the way that sort of zoning is set up is really by the lot. So you'd even have to petition to combine a lot and like get that approved.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, the sort of zoning is usually set more at a neighborhood scale than a building scale. Like if we get into the nitty-gritties of rezoning, we can talk about like sort of challenges to that at the like building scale, but mostly zoning by and large is like set at a neighborhood scale. So it would be unlikely that like the lot right next to you would allow you to like drastically go higher.
What if you will combine residential and commercial, sitting right on the corner? One block is residential, the other part is commercial. Is there can that be combined to get something different?
Yeah, I don't know about the process of actually combining lots. I've never
because I said there's this entity sits on the corner of a commercial strip and a residential.
Yeah, I guess my takeaway is that like you would need to go through a formal city process to combine lots, and it probably would be difficult to just to drastically change what you're allowed to do just by acquiring the lot next to you.
Mm-hmm.
I have another quick question.
Just a quick point of clarification as well. They're called assemblages. So I think the technical term is an assemblage, and we have seen some of those in Bushwick. So we'll have one developer LLC purchasing multiple lots within a row, and then they are eventually able to apply for whatever permits, special, whatever you would need to basically build and develop on all of the lots with the combined FAR.
If I can ask that quick question.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is regarding how so let's say that there's a technical amount of the actual lot. There's a limit to the lot that you can use in terms of its coverage, but then how you use the rest of that lot space, is that still like, is one still free to decide how the rest of that space is used, or are there sort of regulations around like the non-constructed on space, like how that space is used? And I was curious around that.
Yeah, there are other rules that we'll get to in just a minute, but they mostly concern height, like how high you're going to go. So to the questions before yours, even if they're allowed to build to the maximum FAR, they would need an additional special variance to the zoning rule if they wanted to build higher than that. And
Yeah. Oh,
go ahead. I'm done.
okay. I guess I'm also thinking there are other rules too that could apply outside of zoning that impact like how you can use your space in a way, like for example, like Department of Buildings, you need to like apply for some permits if you want to like build a structure in your backyard. So there might be other rules outside of zoning that dictate what you can and can't do on your lot.
I have a question. How does purchasing air rights from the adjacent properties affect our FAR? Does it increase our FAR or just our total buildable square footage in regards to air rights?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. Do you, Augustine?
I don't. I was on a project once where the client bought the air rights from the building next to it, but it was with the understanding that it wouldn't increase their FAR at all. They were doing it to protect their property value so that that building couldn't build any higher. But I don't know how it goes. I think it's a separate thing in addition to, like, one thing is the air rights. A separate thing is if you want to reconsider the FAR. They don't necessarily go together.
But if he does sell his, if the Jason sells his air rights, that means he can't build on top of his home
That's correct.
because he already sold the part. So whatever the property value it is non-void. It is what it is. Correct?
Mm-hmm. That's my understanding of it. Yeah.
Can you have two FARs on one lot? Depending on which way you look at it. If you look from the residential side or the commercial side, or it has to be one FAR? Am I confusing you?
No, I think that's where we would get into the use zoning rules, where a lot, we've been talking about size and shape rules, and that's where FAR comes in. But another set of rules that this workshop doesn't cover is about what the use is allowed to be. And so lots will also be designated residential, commercial, mixed use, industrial. And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if there's a if let's say it's a mixed use building and you're allowed to that it would change. I think it's the same. I think a lot has one FAR and then it also has a use designation. So it would have an FAR of whatever it is, let's say 4.0, and you're allowed to build commercial and residential on it, for instance. But it wouldn't change if you did one more than the other.
Great. So I think we, just for time, and we have a few more activities to do, should move on to the next one. So if you want to click I'm done.
Okay, great. We're going to get into some of these height rules now. Thanks everyone for these incredible questions. And sorry, we don't have better answers for you. These are great because they're going to help us prepare for the next one, where hopefully we will have those answers. So yeah, we're going to talk about height now. The city limits how high you can build to make sure huge buildings don't overshadow smaller ones. So in this neighborhood that we're building, there's a 40-foot overall height limit. and a 30-foot height limit for the wall that faces the street. Yeah, absolutely, Cassandra. We will we'll follow up with you. The tallest point on the building is called the maximum building height. And the height limit for the front wall of the building that faces the street is called the base height. And so now the activity is to rearrange your building so that it meets those requirements. And so to recap, 30-foot limit at the front and 40-foot maximum building height. Okay, let's have a few people share their screen again. Can somebody do it, or should I ask someone?
Don't be shy, everyone.
Cassandra, would you mind if I picked on you?
Oh, I already did it.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Do not call my name.
I'll save everyone. I'll share. I hope I did it right.
Gorgeous. That works.
Celeste, what you trying to do, the project, bro?
It's a nice building for Broadway.
Yeah, we don't want the sun to hit it too much.
Okay, well, that's great. Speaking of sun, why do you think the city requires a lower height limit near the street?
You don't want it to block the sunlight.
That's right. So
Of that building, of that building, not nearby buildings, but of that building. Because if I look at that, if you're not blocking sunlight and you still have a 20-story tower, it's blocking sunlight somewhere. So it must be for the building that's under construction, of those residents of those tenants that don't want to block the sunlight.
yeah, it is. The rule at least was designed to allow more sunlight to reach the street. Because if you have a slightly lower building height next to the street, it's going to allow more sunlight to get down into the street. Great. So the point is of all these activities and rules combined is that as you start layering these rules on top of each other, all the buildings are going to start looking more or less the same because they've all followed all these requirements. So there will be some variation, but very little because they have to all follow these rules. At this point, we're going to switch over to looking at how these rules affect whole neighborhoods. So I'm going to kick it off to Janae for that.
Great. So in the beginning of this activity, when we started out with 1 or 2 rules, the buildings that you all made looked really different from each other. And as you started to see, as the multiple requirements came together, buildings started to look more similar. So all of these rules together create an invisible boundary of the maximum space a building can occupy, which is called the building envelope. People usually build their buildings to fill as much of the building envelope as possible, which is also called maxing out your lot. Why do you think people might want to max out their lots?
More money.
More money. How?
Square
More-
footage is money. They could build a bigger inside and more rooms inside.
Exactly. More rent money. So now we're going to look at what this looks like in a neighborhood. So you can click OK. And you're going to see another pop-up that, yeah, so you click OK when it talks about the zoning in the neighborhood. In the drop-down menu where it says, please select building type, you can click through and see what different neighborhoods look like if they were zoned for different building types. So if you select single family homes and then click build, you can see what a neighborhood like that looks like. So let's start with single family homes. What's the closest neighborhood to you that looks like this, or even section of your neighborhood?
None.
Middle Village, Queens.
Cool. And what about if you select apartment buildings and then click build, you can see what that neighborhood looks like. What's the closest neighborhood to you that looks like this?
If you look at some of the NYCHA buildings, then we could say maybe around Bushwick houses.
Yeah. So below the drop-down menu, there's a control center where you can change each of the rules. You can increase or decrease FAR, the lot size, the lot coverage, the yard requirements, and the height limits. So you can just like play around with that and see how it changes your neighborhood.
So in order to access those controls, go to I'll build with my own numbers. It's in the drop-down menu. And then you can play with those numbers.
Okay.
And once you get a chance to see how how you changing different factors impacts the neighborhood, we're just gonna like have a little discussion. So we're just gonna give folks a couple more minutes to play through it on your own. So what might be some of the pros and cons of living in a neighborhood zoned for single family homes?
Not a lot of people.
Access to space, green space in particular, is what I'm thinking.
Usually you have parking.
Says usually.
Cool. And what about if you think about living in a neighborhood zone for apartment buildings? What are some pros and cons of that?
Too many people.
You might live,
Definitely no parking.
Building height.
you might live near a subway line.
More amenities, better social contact.
And what about a neighborhood zone for towers?
Views.
You might live in the top of one of those towers.
Safety.
Could you elaborate on the safety one? Is that
Earthquakes, plane crashing into your building.
Mhm.
Fire, you can't get to the person on the top floor. In a blackout, you either walk up or walk down, or you just stay down because you can't walk up.
Yeah. So what we have been doing in terms of changing the different parameters around floor to area ratio and lot size is what happens during a rezoning. So we are going to talk about rezonings.
Okay, great. So yeah, when a city or a developer or a group of residents wants to change the zoning in a neighborhood, these are called rezonings. During Mayor de Blasio's administration, the city initiated several rezonings to promote growth in specific areas. So we call it an upzoning when the zoning changes result in an increase in density or intensity of uses. Increasing the density could be like increasing the FAR to allow more floor area, while also increasing the height to allow the buildings to be taller. So earlier at the beginning, when someone mentioned a tower getting built right next door to them, that's because that lot was able to get a higher FAR during an upzoning. Increasing the density could also mean changing the use zoning. So what we said before, it could go from an industrial building that previously housed 0 people, or it could change from industrial to residential, which now means it can house a lot of people. So that's increasing the density of population that can live there. Rezonings can also increase the intensity of use. That could look like changing the rules so that lots that were previously zoned for single families can now hold multiple families. That would be the same use, but more intense because more families can live there now. And it could also change from something like light manufacturing to heavy manufacturing. That would be an increase in intensity. So we're gonna go to the drop-down menu again and click row houses and then click build. Great, so now we're back to the neighborhood full of buildings similar to the ones we built in the previous activities.
Excuse me, were
Yes.
these conversations inclusive of communities or paternalistic? The father says so because I want to make money for for my city.
When there's a rezoning?
Yes, and up zoning. When there's a change.
Yeah. So a lot of things are considered. Unfortunately, making money has for a long time been the only way that that one of the main things cities consider when they are considering an upzoning is how much commercial space can we create, how much money can be created from these changes, with the very blunt idea that by creating a situation where more money can be made, people will be better off. But obviously we know that that isn't leading to very good results. And so that's why it's important to get specific, to be knowledgeable about these specific rules so that you can advocate for specific things in the neighborhood that you'd like to see. There are other reasons that an upzoning could be nice, especially if it comes with protections for the people that already live there. So as some people have mentioned before, an upzoning could lead to amenities in a certain area where there weren't before. It could lead to more affordable housing in an area, as long as there are protections in place when that is passed. It could mean better transportation if a subway stop is planned along with that.
But if my question is, if, let's say for instance, if, because you said that they would change the zoning in regards to maybe people that need a home. So if the census, that's just out of the top of my head, and if the census indicated that we lost people in this community that moved out or left, and we're minus an elected official, then why would they want to upzone when that means we have more empty apartments and there's not a lot of people wanting to? Sometimes people would do that only if it's needed. You know what I'm saying? Just like what you said, if the area needs like affordable housing or housing in general, and the census indicated, our census indicated now that part of Bushwick was because they're eliminating, then we shouldn't be going up zoning. We should be, am I right? Or
Yeah.
because that means we have enough housing because a lot of people left compared to what we had 10 years ago. Because that's what the census says. I'm using the data that the city gave out now that's eliminating elected because Bushwick, some areas lost families. So I don't think that the mayor's thing by upzoning is helping us in any way, because we lost people.
Yeah, I'd also like to sort of like back up and say that this workshop is really just about understanding like zoning and what the function of zoning is. And zoning can, I feel like, so zoning, I guess, has like good uses in terms of being able to like restrict a factory next to a school. And it can also have like, you know, some negative impacts, even if the intentions of the use were good. And I think, or in the intentions of the tool were good, it can still have negative impacts on community. And I think the point is that like in a lot of these conversations where zoning has been made and decisions have been made, they haven't meaningfully involved community. And that is sort of, I guess, the issue.
So if I may, so I've been waiting for a few minutes. I want to make sure we're providing enough context specifically to what's happened in Bushwick. So, you know, going back to what was described as what zoning is or what happens in a rezoning or an upzoning, it doesn't necessarily take an upzoning for someone to build a very large building. You also have some communities like Bushwick that have outdated zoning that dates back to 1961, where the city was in a very different time period. They were trying to incentivize development as folks were actively or in the process of fleeing the city. Like a lot of programs from that time, they're no longer applicable to what's happening right now. So when we have a lot that's R6, which is, you know, it could be either height factor or density. Height factor meaning like a tower in the park, we stack all those little blocks up to our max FAR, right? You know, or you have like the smaller, you know, thicker building that we, you know, may cover more of the lot area. That's what's allowable in Bushwick right now. And, you know, speaking to the rezonings that the previous administration was, you know, a part of, you know, Bushwick was also included in that process. But towards the end, right there, the community and the administration reached an impasse because there was a difference in vision. You know, the administration wanted to, you know, move forward and manufacturing to residential rezoning. They wanted to increase the amount of residential units to address the city's in their words, address the city's housing crisis. However, there were concerns from the community, and I want to emphasize this was a community-led process. Wasn't like that everywhere, but there were folks involved, different stakeholders, local organizations, you know, block associations. It changed. This was a 6-year process, but it really depends on what area you're in and who's driving the process. The same cannot be said for East New York. They had a different, you know, they were one of the first rezonings. It was very different. Also East Harlem, they had the speaker as their city council member. So very different resources, very different process. You know, and we have other examples, but I want to be clear that there was community involvement, at least in terms of the Bushwick Community Plan. And a lot of the zoning we see that's out of context, meaning it doesn't look like our row houses, is because of outdated R6 zoning in Bushwick. That's all.
Thank you so much for that context. Maybe we could continue with the activity, but if folks want to have other questions, let's definitely bring those up.
I think she was right. Let's keep it in the context of what is far, because this is personal at this point. So for me, so my questions are just trying to understand how far could mess with my head. So I'm just trying to understand. Resume.
Yeah, we can move on with the activity. So, and then other questions we can always answer afterwards. The board will be having these conversations throughout the year in the housing and land use. And like you said, this training is specifically just to understand the tool and how it works. So yeah.
So in a rezoning where the FAR in a neighborhood changes, what will often, so in this part of the tool, the buildings in green are what we are about to be able to change, and the buildings in gray are the buildings that still will retain the FAR that was there originally before the rezonings. So in the drop-down menu, if you select, I'll build with my own numbers. Let's increase the FAR to 4.0. And let's increase the height limit to 80 feet, so double it. And the street wall to 70 feet. And then let's click build. So an important thing to note about rezonings is that they don't tear anything down. Only, so old buildings are grandfathered in, and the rules only apply to new developments that would be built after the zoning change. And what often happens is that an increase of 50% or more will often lead to pressure to tear down old buildings and build new, bigger buildings at the maximum FAR. So this is all talking about an upzoning. There's also something called a downzoning. So communities can initiate downzonings as a way to protect the character of their neighborhood. And this usually happens in areas where existing buildings are mostly below the allowed FAR. The rezoned FAR is meant to more closely match what's already built. And in most rezonings, there is some combination of areas that are upzoned, usually near transit and on major avenues, and ones that are downzoned on residential streets. And many rezonings are led by the city, but communities can propose them too. So yeah, let's keep talking about it. Do you like the size and the shape of the buildings in your neighborhood? Would you like to change the FAR of your neighborhood in any way? And if so, would you want it to be increased or decreased?
My fingers is hovering over this mute button. I'm going to mute myself. Okay, Celeste.
I would say contextual zoning. Be great to have some contextual zoning.
Can you say more about that?
Sure. So the neighborhood is, well, different now, but used to be primarily, you know, what, 2 to 4 family row houses and some apartment buildings that would probably be as big as the row houses at their maximum height. Now, because of the, you know, non-contextual zoning, we see what some folks have called finger buildings. So basically the towers that just pop up on the block, you know, 11 stories, some cases 20 stories. It really depends on the FAR. Not all, you know, property owners or developers have a sizable lot like that to be able to build that high. But in some instances, we've even seen proposals up to like, I think 30 stories max. Thankfully, that one in particular did not come to fruition yet. But most of it's private development that wouldn't trigger any type of, you know, zoning or land use application that the board would have to review, which has obviously led to tension and frustration in the community.
So what is like the difference between like private and public, like, you know, development in terms of like what regulations people have to follow, and like, are there any caps on private development? Or can they just like do whatever they want, which is like the impression I get.
I'm happy. Yes. So, I mean, I think the only distinction, everyone has to follow the zoning law, the building laws, you know, and if folks appear as if they're not, then that is, of course, should be reported to 311, to the board's office, our elected officials. But as it relates to the difference, the main difference as it, you know, in terms of the community board's role, some of those applications for private development won't be coming to the board's office because there is no requirement. Whereas for land use applications through the ULURP process, Uniform Land Use Review, they would be coming to the board because they are charter mandated to come before the board and start a cycle for review, public review.
And on the public side, they are students' government funding, even if it's a little bit, even if like $1 of HUD money touches any sort of public-private development, and other compliance things trigger, such as whatever term sheets they've applied to, but anything outside that term sheet. So they usually always have to come see us and we can put in some input, but as Les said, unless something like a major is happening on the private side, they can do whatever they want.
Okay, so I heard you specifically ask for contextual zoning. Is there anything else that you would phrase, like using any of the technical lingo that we learned today about how you would like the city to change the zoning in your neighborhood or keep it the same?
Right. Have you heard of Bushwick Community Plan? We can go, if you want to words, we'll go all day.
Yeah, 1.0 FAR. I'll make it easy. Yeah, 1.0 FAR. Retain that.
Have there been like successful like downzoning processes led by communities?
Successful is a tricky term, but speaking for areas that I'm aware of outside of the district that I don't know about in detail, perhaps folks at CUP know a little bit more, but I know that there were communities prior to the de Blasio administration that were able to downzone portions of their district, such as Bed-Stuy, and then upzone in other areas. And I believe this is all connected to 197A plans, right? Which any community could do a 197A plan. And there are other areas as well. So where you'll see more contextual, downzoning in more residential areas and upzoning perhaps along corridors, like major transit corridors, areas closer to the subway, that kind of thing. So communities have worked together to change zoning. So if that's how you define successful. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Celeste.
Yeah, I have a question for, I don't know how relevant it is, but regarding land use, um, if you're in the process of, let's say, a rezoning or you're pushing for some sort of selective rezoning, is the land use designation tied to that? Do you also have to change your land use if applicable? Does one process take longer than the other?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, because the rezoning could be either, or like you can change many aspects of it. Like you can either change the use, that's probably a different pathway than changing size, height, things about what you can build on your lot.
Yeah, I guess I should have been more specific. Essentially, if you own, like, if you own a lot space and one sort of development plan is not working for you, or for instance, you are a developer and you have access to capital to rebuild the whole land space, and you want to like maximize the envelope or whatever the phrase was. The essentially, the process of rezoning would come into play if, let's say, you were, I guess, building it out for like a manufacturing, and then the neighborhood changed, and now you're trying to capitalize on building it for something else. Yeah, essentially, you would essentially have to file for rezoning, but like essentially, what's to stop people from changing the use of their space every few years and just turning it over and trying to turn one lot into various different building uses over the course of time without like regard for the neighborhood?
I think I guess I'm just speaking from my experience as an organizer in a past job working with issues around rezoning is like, if it triggers ULURP, like that is still like, that could be a disincentive, but it could also, I guess I'm saying like, that is a process that probably like changing the use to be more intense would probably trigger a ULURP. And that's something that some developers have the capacity to do and pay for, some don't. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
It sort of does. I'm kind of not sure about all these things, but essentially,
Les
just
says
from
I'm
the
wrong,
perspective,
so
even
so you can chime in, because I might be thinking about a different, like I really think it depends on the scenario and what exactly is changing. Because in the case I was thinking of, like it wasn't a spot rezoning. So go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna, add like, so we don't see everybody filing to go through a ULURP process, usually because spot rezonings aren't allowed. They have to be like usually larger projects that would include like an area, and that they would speak to city planning. City planning would provide feedback on what would make the most sense. Some examples in the neighborhood for folks to look into: 1601 DeKalb, that recently went through ULURP, currently being used, I think it was manufacturing next to 2 loft buildings or 1 loft building. The loft tenants were concerned about how that project, which is now currently a parking lot, right? There are no stackable vehicles there. How would that affect their light? How would that affect some of the other conditions there? And it's a 100% affordable project. You also have 349 Saddam, the Saddam rezoning, which is a mixed use project, both manufacturing and residential. So they're increasing the manufacturing, I believe, on the Saddam side. And then on the Willoughby side, they're going to be adding new residential to that project. So, those are all within a larger context of like what's nearby. There's a school near that one. So it's not just like one property can say, hey, I want to capitalize off the market. Can we just switch my zoning over to residential now? Because it'll be great for me, maybe not so great for everyone else. But yeah, and it's expensive to come up with those larger proposals.
Sometimes a building will have a range of certificate of occupancy that's allowable. So for instance, if, you know, it once had up to 6 apartment units and but was then converted into a townhouse or something, it will retain that ability to change the certificate of occupancy. You still have to pay for it, but it's like a micro allowable spot rezoning that's kind of built into that specific lot. But I don't think that's what you were getting at exactly.
I know it's not the community, but Ridgewood, that ugly, hideous finger that sticks out up on Grove and it was a St. Nicholas, Wyckoff, took down probably 4 houses. So combined lots. So I'm still not understanding this tower effect to minimal space. The mathematics is just not, if I do the algebra, the geometry, I just can't see the perpendicular line. I can't envision the imaginary line because conceptually it's out of sorts with the rest of the community. And maybe 4 houses had to be taken away to build a 15 or 25-story pointed Empire State Building style apartment building. So I'm not sure if people look at the rest of the community when they develop. They may use the land, and I'm using the wrong terminology probably, but it's still not stylistically or architecturally respectful. But it sounds this is more like the politicians need to get involved as well as the community to make changes. Sounds like I might have hope of protesting this if there was a method or means to do that. It just seems like residents are looking at these spiraling towers, the one on Willoughby Street, why so tall? Just popping up in neighborhoods and we're wondering why. It can't be affordable, and it's not affordable because affordable, I'm pretty set up. I can't afford what's affordable. So I'm just not sure how this is congruent with community understanding developers' land rights, but not the rest of the residents' land rights.
So, I mean, I think that's a very good question. I know if I was Thursday, but I was listening to what you were saying. And we do have a density issue and a population issue we have to address for when it comes down to building in New York City. Period. We're running out of public land, so we have to build up. That's just what's going to be, or people just need to move outside of the city. Second, when the affordability question is kind of the trick, right? Because as a developer, I can go in and I say, I'm going to build affordable in your community. I can go between 30 to 120 AMI, right? And I'm still going to get my tax credits. So I'm still going to get, depending on which program I'm going to get to, I'm going to get probably $163,000 per unit when it comes to it. It's going to lower my construction costs. It's going to lower my pre-development costs. So, but as long as I'm within there, it's considered affordable. But what you're seeing is developers that are saying, okay, we're going to put those buildings up, but they're going to be at the max AMI, which is technically market rate. So you're right, it isn't affordable to your wallet, but according to the regulations and compliance, it still is affordable.
Yeah, you know, that is starting to get into a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about next week at the affordable housing workshop, where we're going to really understand what how some of these apartments that, as you say, you can't afford, even though you're well set up, and how that comes to be. So yeah, please join us next week. We're going to be doing that in person, and we can share that flyer again if you'd like to sign up. We'd like to close out now. We hope this workshop has helped set a bit of a foundation around understanding FAR. And clearly there's a lot of conversations that this has brought up that we'd like to keep having And we'll get back to you on a lot of the questions that came up that we weren't able to provide detailed answers for. I'd also like to, before we go, offer, we are giving away some guidebooks this summer for each of our toolkits. So about zoning, about affordable housing, and about the ULERP process. And so I'll send that to Celeste afterwards, and she can send around the form for you to request free guidebooks if you'd like to receive those. Okay, good deal, Cassandra. Looking forward to seeing you there. Fabulous. Okay, well, we'll send out that form and y'all can sign up for them.
So yeah,
Well,
I
this
guess
has been informative. Thank you.
yeah. Right. So yeah, and just to close out with some remarks, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to the CUP team for being here. We know that this isn't just a one event conversation. Like you said, it's really a foundation. As board members change, as our community knowledge changes, we need to always hit refresh, and make sure that we're keeping informed, so that way we can also help inform the larger community. A lot of these topics are complicated. They can be frustrating. We know it's very personal, especially when you have a situation like Ms. Hicks' situation. But that's why we're here, right? To learn together, work with community partners, and see what is possible and how we can take this knowledge and turn it into advocacy with our elected officials and get what's needed in Bushwick. So just want to say thank you. I don't know, Mr. Camacho, if you have anything you want to add. We're good to go.
Yeah, we're good to go. I just want to say thank you for everyone that participate. Thank you for the teachers and giving us a crash course. We enjoyed it. But we'll keep doing more of these, because we have a lot of new board members, and we want to also the old timers too might need a little wax up and some wax and some little grease to make sure we catch up on, because we've been locked in the house for 2 years, so now we can go to work and make sure but if not, everybody have a safe and wonderful summer. And we're always here. CB4 is always ready. Celeste's always working. Look, she's in the office now, and she should be home. It's 7:38, so it's gonna cost me in my budget, right?
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye. Thank you so much.